On a June morning in 2025, the world awoke to war, not peace. The sun rose over cities that felt eerily silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The sense of normalcy that people clung to just hours before had vanished, replaced by a chilling uncertainty that swept across continents. In Kiev, families sheltered from Russian missiles, clutching their children and listening for the distant thunder of explosions. The underground stations, once bustling with commuters, had become makeshift sanctuaries, echoing with whispered prayers and the hum of fear. Meanwhile, halfway across the globe, Iran and Israel exchanged live fire. The night sky over the Middle East was streaked with missiles, and city streets trembled under the weight of distant detonations. Civilians everywhere braced for the unknown, as the world's flashpoints erupted in tandem. These weren't isolated events. They signaled a dangerous unraveling of the global order, pushing humanity closer to major power conflict than at any time since the Cold War. The world map glowed with new hotspots, each one a warning flare in the darkness. The idea of a third world war once seemed unthinkable, a relic of history books and old nightmares. But now anxiety has replaced the optimism that followed the Soviet Union's collapse. People everywhere watched their screens, searching for hope in a sea of breaking news. Institutions built to prevent catastrophe are weakening, and powerful nations are discarding the rules that kept peace. The United Nations, once a symbol of global unity, now stands empty and powerless, its ideals crumbling alongside the buildings that housed them. Conversations in government and military circles have shifted from preventing regional wars to managing the terrifying possibility of a global one. Leaders and advisors, once focused on diplomacy, now debate strategies for survival in a world on the brink. Every diplomatic failure and act of aggression tightens the knot of global tension. Each broken promise, each hostile headline adds another thread to a web that threatens to ensnare us all. The world is now multipolar, but without consensus on the rules. Competing blocs, resurgent nationalism, and nostalgia for empire define our era. International summits end in deadlock, while the streets outside fill with protest and division. The United States no longer enjoys unrivaled dominance, while China and Russia aggressively reshape the global order. The balance of power is shifting, and with it, the rules that once kept the peace are being rewritten or ignored. This volatile landscape is fertile ground for the seeds of a new world war. The scars of old conflicts are reopening, and new ones are being etched into the earth, visible even from space. The unthinkable is now a looming reality. As the doomsday clock ticks ever closer to midnight, the world stands at a crossroads, one where every decision, every misstep could determine the fate of humanity. The fear of global conflict is not just a product of public anxiety or media speculation. It is grounded in hard data and the sober assessments of leading experts around the world. As tensions rise and the international order shifts, analysts are increasingly sounding the alarm about the fragility of global peace. A 2024 Atlantic Council survey found that 40% of global security experts now believe a world war is likely by 2035, a figure that has climbed steadily in recent years. These experts, drawing on decades of experience and data, warn that the risks are not hypothetical, but real and growing. The guardrails that once prevented great power confrontation, diplomatic norms, treaties, and strong global institutions are eroding. Organizations like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, once pillars of stability, are now seen as increasingly ineffective and unable to keep pace with today's challenges. This growing power vacuum emboldens aggressive states to test boundaries, while the world shifts from a single superpower to a chaotic, unpredictable multipolar order. The rules that governed the post-Cold War era are breaking down, leaving uncertainty in their wake. Nearly half of surveyed experts now predict a world divided into two major blocs, one led by the United States, the other by China. This division is already shaping alliances, trade, and security policies across continents. 46% expect a formal alliance to emerge between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, a coalition that could challenge Western influence and further destabilize the global balance of power. Meanwhile, confidence in America's traditional alliances is waning. NATO and other partnerships face internal divisions and external pressures, making the world stage more unpredictable than it has been in decades. The clear lines of the Cold War are gone, replaced by a tangled web of rivalries and shifting allegiances. In this environment, A single miscalculation or misunderstanding could trigger a crisis with global consequences. The risk of escalation has never been higher, and the world's experts agree. The stakes for humanity have rarely been so great. Nowhere is the risk of great power conflict more acute than the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan is the flashpoint between the US and China. Beijing sees it as a breakaway province, while Washington is committed to its defense. 65% of experts believe China will attempt to retake Taiwan by force within the next decade. Under Xi Jinping, China's military drills and incursions have intensified, signaling a shrinking window for peaceful resolution. A conflict over Taiwan would be catastrophic, disrupting global trade, severing the world's supply of advanced semiconductors, and risking direct war between nuclear powers. The economic fallout would dwarf recent crises, and the strategic consequences would reshape Asia. US intervention could trigger a wider Indo-Pacific war, drawing in Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. This is the scenario that keeps military planners awake at night. One spark here could ignite a global conflagration. In Europe, the specter of major war has returned. The continent, once hopeful for a lasting peace after the Cold War, now finds itself gripped by anxiety and uncertainty. The echoes of past conflicts seem to reverberate through empty streets and tense city squares as the threat of violence looms ever closer. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shattered the belief that large-scale land wars were history. The devastation across Ukraine is a stark reminder that peace in Europe is fragile, and that old rivalries can erupt into open conflict with little warning. A new Iron Curtain divides a militarized Russia from an expanded NATO, raising the risk of direct nuclear confrontation. The border between East and West is now bristling with troops, tanks, and missiles, as both sides prepare for the unthinkable. 45% of experts now predict a Russia-NATO conflict by 2035, up sharply from the previous year. The sense of impending crisis is growing as military analysts and policymakers scramble to assess the risks and prevent disaster. The war in Ukraine is a bloody stalemate, but Russia's aggressive posture and threats toward NATO members escalate the danger. Each day, the front lines remain locked in brutal combat with no clear end in sight. Every new Western arms delivery to Ukraine raises the stakes, with Moscow warning of consequences. The flow of advanced weaponry into the region has become a flashpoint, fueling fears of a wider confrontation. A single miscalculation, a stray missile, a clash over the Black Sea, could trigger NATO's collective defense and a continent-wide war. The margin for error is razor-thin, and the consequences of a mistake could be catastrophic for millions. Neutral countries like Finland and Sweden have joined NATO, while Germany is massively increasing defense spending. The security landscape of Europe is being transformed, as nations that once stood apart now seek protection within alliances. This military buildup creates a security dilemma, where each side's defensive moves are seen as threats, fueling a spiral of escalation. Trust is eroding, and the risk of misunderstanding grows with every new deployment. Europe is once again on a knife's edge. The choices made in the coming years will determine whether the continent descends into chaos or finds a way back from the brink of war. The Middle East is closer to full-scale war than in decades. Iran and Israel are now openly exchanging fire, escalating years of shadow conflict. The crisis, supercharged by the 2023 Hamas attack and war in Gaza, has drawn in regional proxies and threatens to ignite a wider conflict. Disruption of the Strait of Hormuz would send shockwaves through the global economy, while U.S. involvement could escalate the war further. Meanwhile, India and Pakistan's renewed clashes over Kashmir risk spiraling into nuclear conflict. These regional flashpoints are now deeply interconnected. Any could trigger a global crisis. In today's fractured world, regional fires are no longer contained. The risk of escalation is ever present. The Middle East remains a powder keg. The nuclear threat, once a Cold War relic, is back with a vengeance. Nearly half of global security experts now expect nuclear weapons to be used by 2035, a dramatic rise in just 1 year. Russia's nuclear threats over Ukraine and North Korea's expanding arsenal make the risk terrifyingly real. Proliferation is accelerating. 88% of experts expect at least one new nuclear state by 2035, with Iran the most likely candidate. U.S. allies like South Korea, Japan, and Saudi Arabia are openly debating their own nuclear deterrence. The world is moving from a bipolar standoff to a chaotic multi-nuclear landscape. More nuclear states mean more risk of miscalculation, accidental use, or weapons falling into the wrong hands. Arms control treaties are collapsing, leaving the world without a safety net. The nuclear shadow looms larger than ever. The margin for error is shrinking. Beyond expert analysis, public anxiety is fueled by prophecies and mystics. Predictions from Baba Vanga and Nostradamus, once dismissed, now resonate as war rages in Ukraine and tensions rise in Asia. These prophecies tap into a primal fear that current events are part of a catastrophic pattern. Modern psychics warn of wars driven by machines or a global lack of compassion. Whether or not these predictions are accurate, their cultural impact is real, feeding a sense of fatalism and inevitability. This anxiety can erode public will to seek peace, making war seem unavoidable. A third world war would be fought on new frontiers, digital, automated, and extraterrestrial. The first shots might be lines of code, not bullets, as AI and cyber attacks paralyze critical infrastructure. Autonomous weapons could make life or death decisions in microseconds, risking uncontrollable escalation. Cyber warfare would target power grids, financial systems, and communications, blurring the line between civilian and military. Space is now a contested military domain, with satellites vital for communication and navigation. Anti-satellite weapons threaten to blind nations and create dangerous debris fields. 45% of experts expect conflict in space within a decade. The next war could be everywhere and nowhere all at once. The world stands at a crossroads, facing the highest risk of global conflict in decades. Yet the future is not set. Humanity still has agency. Renewed diplomacy and open communication between major powers are urgent priorities. Rebuilding arms control, especially for nuclear, AI, and space weapons, is essential. Global institutions like the UN need reform and empowerment, not abandonment. Strengthening cooperation on shared challenges can build bridges and reduce tensions. Avoiding war requires strength, wisdom, and restraint, deterrence paired with a genuine commitment to peace. The path forward is narrow, demanding courageous leadership and an informed, engaged public. The choices we make now will determine whether we step back from the abyss or plunge into catastrophe.